Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of In Conversation series. Those who've been following us know that we've been celebrating Women's Day with week long activities under the theme Women Trailblazers, leading the change and influencing the world. Over this week, we've acknowledged, applauded, and engaged with some of the top women leaders through feature stories and dialogues. I'm Pooja Bothra, content lead at ETHR World, and today I have a very special guest, Anuradha, aka Anu. Anu is a member of the management committee of HUL, is executive director HR and vice president HR, Unilever South Asia. She's also a member of the Unilever Global HR leadership team. Anu joined HUL as a management trainee after passing out of Acceleri in 1999. She spent the first 14 years of her HUL career working with teams in customer development, employee relations, and as HR partner in HUL Management Committee in Supply Chain and Marketing. After that, she worked at Unilever's headquarters in London for 6 years, part of which was as VP HR, Home Care, where she shaped the business's organizational and cultural transformation to be more agile and consumer connected. She was recognized among the India's most powerful women in business by a leading business magazine in 2020. Thank you for joining us to explore the topic women's self-care, health and well-being. In the present, women leaders have taken charge across the globe in every domain and play a significant role in shaping an organization's evolution and success story. However, are they equally investing in their personal care and well being? To that point, Anu, my first question to you is, and before I say the question, a very warm welcome and thank you for
joining.
Thank
you, Pooja. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So, Anu, the first question is very topical and very close to my heart as well. Self care is a prerequisite for our physical, emotional, and mental well being. Besides, research points out that high levels of self care make a person more creative and productive. How can we persuade women to make self care a part of their routine life?
So, Pooja, the first thing I want to say is that self care starts with self. What does it look like? I think for me, self care is about simple things like eating right, exercising, making time for yourself, of things which we as women struggle to do when we are trying to get everything perfect between giving the most to our families, to our social circles, to the workplace, drawing boundaries and being able to say no both at work and at home, pursuing a hobby or a career, something that brings out the creative side of you, and making simple changes in your life that can give you a little bit of comfort or get you a little bit of support that allows you to balance better. So for me, this is what self-care like, and it starts with the individual and a woman taking ownership for this. Now, as an organization, it is not easy. It's easier said than done. And I think as an organization that is committed to be more inclusive and gender balanced, we have a big role in enabling this. I think HUL has also been cognizant about this, the changing landscape, particularly the last year, which we know has been hard on everyone, but particularly on women. And therefore, what we have done is understanding that for men and women equally, self-care and well-being is important. We have a very holistic approach to well-being, which looks at the physical, mental, emotional, and purposeful. Because we really believe that each of these has an interplay on the other and contributes to how a person feels on the whole and performs at home and at the workplace. Now, is it harder for women? Obviously, we know that the pandemic has been really hard. It was always harder for women, and the pandemic in particular has made it harder with, increased domestic and parental responsibilities on top of everything that they have to give to the organization. So what are some of the actions that we have taken over the years to promote self-care? I think a big part of this is having role models and communities of care, because the one thing that I have benefited from the most in my life is having senior women role models who can, be there to give you the advice, sometimes shoulder to cry on, sometimes to give you that nudge and say, stop being victim. And I think the power of role models in an organization is immense. And not just in an organization, but also in society. For women who have been able to get somewhere, for them to encourage, inspire others, talk about their interests, talk about their vulnerabilities, talk about things that they do off work and at work, and also talk about the things that they do to unwind. Gone are the days when, it's cool for a woman leader or any leader actually to say, I work 24/7 or I'm always on. I think the new model of leadership is one that looks and understands the individual in totality. And so, therefore, I think role models for women is absolutely critical. The second thing is communities of care, where women can reach out to each other, build networks. For example, in HUL, we have something that we call lean-in circles for our women in our uni ops office in Bangalore, where we have over 4,000 employees. And the idea of these communities of care is to promote peer-to-peer learning and group mentoring. So I think this is something which is absolutely critical and goes a long way in encouraging women to think about self-care. The other thing I said is, being vulnerable and saying that it's okay to be vulnerable and not have it all perfect. So we have recently launched something called a Mental Health Champions Network. And this is basically Unilever's commitment to destigmatize mental health issues across the workplace. And so the Mental Health Champion program enables employees to have a free dialogue with their peers. These are people who have, understood a little bit more about what well-being can look like, and they've volunteered their time and support, and they're available to learn and signpost colleagues for help and support. And in the last 5 or 6 months, we've trained more than 300 people in our business, and the idea is to have many more such like this. The other thing I spoke about in self-care is also having an interest outside work. And a lot of this, confidence and self-care is about socializing, is about meeting friends. And suddenly, because of the lockdown, because of the pandemic, many people or most of us couldn't go out at all. And that's when we realized that as an organization, we have a duty of care. And we started employee nudges by putting out a weekend newsletter, which was actually focused on things that people could do at home to unwind, to take care of themselves, to pursue a hobby. And we had more than 200 people, 200 employees sharing their interests, and whether it was cooking, painting, or virtual tours that they took. So there were all kinds of things. And I think the last thing I said is, taking some time off for yourself. The one thing we did do was last year, we really encouraged all employees to take some time off. Take your mandatory 2 weeks off, even if it means that you're not going anywhere and doing nothing and just chilling on your balcony. And I think most of all, it's about creating a culture where people feel safe, where women can actually say that, listen, I want a little bit of time out, or I am feeling overwhelmed. So I think this for me in totality is about supporting and encouraging self-care.
Thank you, Anuradha. So you have kind of covered every aspect of women's self-care, even addressing the, stress-related, pandemic-related stress, as well as, stigma attached to mental health, and women especially open to coming and talking about their problems with their peers and managers. So while everything has already been covered, so now I'm going to go more microscopic and ask you, what is your self-care routine? What is it you follow to keep sane and, keep going?
So first of all, I think it's really, for me, it's about, knowing that, I should start by saying that I like to do a lot in my life. I like to pack things. I like to do a lot at work. I like to do a lot at home. So whether I'm meeting friends, whether I'm at work, I like to bring the most to it. But that means that sometimes it can become overwhelming, and I have to take a pause and remind myself that, you can't be perfect at everything. And the first thing is to learn to say no. And that is something that I really struggle with. So I think practicing to, have some boundaries is the first thing that I have started to do. For me, my weekend time is special because it's really the time I get with my family. So, as far as possible, or very few and occasional only work calls, meetings, engagements. And I think that, that boundary, that those are the 2 days when I have for myself, when I have for my family, is very important. I think the thing that I have learned is to also make sure that I don't do too much on the weekends, and that I really sit back and take the time to relax, unwind mentally as much as physically. So, a little bit of exercise. Of course, I'm a social person, so I do enjoy catching up with friends. And most of all, for me, it's really about the time that we spend as a family. My husband also has a busy career. So, as three of us, um, as a family, my husband, son, and I don't get that much time together. We have a puppy, a new dog. So I don't know whether that's adding to self care or taking away from self care, all the work. But, I think that time together is very special. And when I have that, then I can go back on a Monday feeling very, very recharged. The other thing is that I've been practicing a little bit of mindfulness.
Okay.
I don't do it every day, but particularly on days when I feel like, it's all becoming too much, or I have a big meeting and I just want to get my thoughts in order, I do a simple mindfulness practice. I use the Headspace app. So this is simple things that I do. And I always commit to exercising. I often don't, but that's sort
Yeah,
of the
that's
journey of a
good.
lifetime.
Yeah. But, even I have kind of learned mindfulness, and I did a course with one of these online learning companies. And while I was doing it, I really felt my focus really improving.
Yes,
But it's very difficult to kind of, continue doing that. It's like it happens in sports.
yes,
So, Anuradha, I know we've already touched upon the, stress that pandemic has brought into our lives.
yes,
But there's a study that from McKinsey that says that women are 1.3 times more likely than men to have considered stepping out of the workforce, as it was more difficult for them to balance work and personal life. So, do you think that in your organization or in your industry, because you're also attached to FICCI and CII and Chamber of Commerce, what are the signs that you're really getting from, let's say, these bigger organizations where they are doing so many activities for women? One thing. And secondly, do you think there are different activities that you're doing for women and for men? Because I'm sure the mechanism to cope with stress could require a different string of activities.
yes. So, first of all, let me say that I agree with what the McKinsey study has thrown up. Uh, One of the things that we did last year within the organization, and what I'm also hearing corroborated through various networks and industry bodies, is that women have been hit worse, and particularly women in the age group of 31 to 39, because they have had the most challenging time sustaining healthy work life balance compared to any other stage, any other age group. As they navigate a very, very critical stage in their personal lives. And this was always the case where, there tended to be a cliff and women wanted to step out of the workforce, particularly after they embraced marriage and motherhood. But the pandemic made it worse. And this is something that I've heard echoed through a number of organizations and a number of all my networks. I think a huge number of initiatives are being taken, some of which I already spoke about in terms of, different well-being tools, having different approaches to, flexible working. The one thing that I believe can make the single largest difference is creating a sense of psychological safety, or a sort of a climate in the team, or a relationship between boss and subordinate, where the person feels that they can be themselves and they can actually tell you what's going on. And I was looking at a study which I think Google did, which says that One of the highest predictors of performance for an organization is psychological safety in teams. And often, we feel the need to wear a mask. It happens to me, it happens to a lot of people around us, where, we have fear of being judged, criticized, and therefore creating a little bit of psychological safety, an environment of trust, empathy, genuine listening can go a long way. And I think creating psychological safety is really about doing simple things, making personal connections. Ask the question, how are you? What is going on? And
Mm.
don't assume that just because someone says fine or doesn't say that something is wrong, that actually everything is okay. It requires investment, and it requires that investment from the part of a leader or the line manager, because the onus is on us in this case to make the other person and team members feel comfortable. Again, talking about your own experiences, saying that you have struggled from time to time. And I think if there's one thing we prioritize, it would be this. And we have experimented with something we call a well-being quotient, which allows individuals to take a measure of where they stand on different parts of their well-being. This is for men and women. But the
Mm.
purpose of the tool is to really facilitate a conversation between the line manager and say, okay, this is saying that, this is telling me that I'm not making time to eat regularly. And you know what? 3 days out of 5 this week, we had big team meetings, which were between 12 and 1, and that's the time I need to feed my family and I get no time for myself. Simple things like that, which throw the light on an issue and allow you to have a conversation about, making simple changes. So I think that is certainly one thing that we can help. And the second is, of course, flexible working. And what we've seen through the last year is that flexible working is very much possible, has become the norm. But I think we are now again reaching a very, very critical stage as people and offices have started to come back. This is going to be a phased and a long and arduous return to work because the pandemic hasn't gone away. And I think that return will happen at different stages for different people. Often it will mean that women cannot come back soon because they have children are still not going to school or they have caregiving responsibilities, and therefore making sure that as we start to adopt hybrid ways of working, how can we create a level playing field where it was easy when everyone was in office, or it was easy, we got used to everyone being virtual. Now when it's half and half, how do we create an atmosphere, how do we create a cadence where it's a level playing field and no one feels left out because they are not in the room? So I think these are some thoughts in addition to everything else that I've said.
Thank you, Anuradha. And I feel the culture of an organization plays a key role. And in that respect, I feel HUL is like one of the front runners because, I remember years back, HUL was one of the first workplaces that had established a daycare in their premises.
Yes.
Because, one of my friend was kind of the daycare provider. And I was really, even at that time, I was very, very intrigued. And, I was like, wow, really things are changing in India. That's one side to it. Second side to it is that we have government's regulations saying that one director has to be a female, a woman, as well as the culture is pro, having diversity in the organization. But what kind of strides are we really making? What kind of changes are you really seeing? And is it just like a tick box activity, or we are actually creating a level playing field for diversity, inclusivity, and equity in the organization?
So, first of all, Pooja, I think there is well documented research that more women and a more gender balanced workforce makes for an organization that is more innovative and therefore more successful. And there is nothing that I can add to that. Yes, of course, a lot of companies and a lot of statutes are now demanding that we have women and quotas. I don't think it's about quotas, but I do think that if one is serious about creating a gender balanced organization and a truly inclusive organization, we must set ourselves goals and clear goals and go after them just like we do for any other business goals that we set. because this is ultimately going to lead to better business performance. And Unilever and specifically HUL have been on this journey for the last 10 years. And we have done this in a very, very scientific way, where, we've how we have attracted women, how we've hired women, and then how we have enabled them to thrive in the organization. And we have done this, like I said, through a lot of measurement, through a lot of listening, and course correction. And today we've moved up from 18% to 42% in the managerial cadre. We want to be 50% in the next few years. Now we are sort of broad basing our efforts so that we have more women across all levels in the organization. And we've made a commitment that in the next 4 years, we want to bring in 2,000 women on the shop floor. But how has this happened, or how can organizations look to make this change? I think if we believe that it's about hiring women and getting them to adjust to an ecosystem as it is, nothing will happen. They will just come, see if it works out, and walk away. So therefore, I think a holistic approach which looks at change the women, change the men, change the organization, and more importantly, change the conversations that happen in the corridors, at the coffee machines, will make a difference. I think culture change, this culture change, like any other, requires a lot of role modeling, a lot of hand-holding. And therefore, it requires, as an organization, for us to see what are some of our underlying beliefs and what are our unconscious biases. And one of the things that we have done well is really facilitated a series of open dialogues with senior leaders, which we call #unstereotype. And the idea is put out there and say, what are some of the beliefs? For example, there was a time when the conversation was that, we are bringing in more women, and this is leading to a dilution of merit. So then we have an open conversation and say that, as a leader, have you ever compromised on merit? And then if you have never done it, then where is this conversation and misperception coming from? So I think conversations, leaders, role modeling, and having the courage is the right thing. And a number of things, it doesn't happen by accident. For example, we've learned that, when we always say we want gender balanced slates when we are hiring, if you have only one woman candidate, and if you have 3 or 4 or more men, what is going to happen? She is going to stand out, and if anything, she is going to look more diverse. So our simple rule is have a balanced slate, or at least see 2 women candidates. And it needs that critical mass for culture change to start happening. And then all the other things that we've spoken about, flexi work, making sure that there is support at critical times. Our maternity return rate is 97%. We've had a daycare in our corporate offices. In the last year, we've opened 15 daycares in our factories, and a whole host of other things. One thing I'll tell you is that we don't run a single training program or a leadership intervention which is focused only on women. It is all about helping men and women equally give their best to the organization. So, and I think when you do this consistently and holistically over many years, then culture change happens.
Very interesting, and you brought a very true point. I've got 2 sons, and my husband and I often tell them that you got to work harder, to actually find a place for yourself in corporates, because it's not going to be easy for you at all. So this is actually a reality, but I think, it'll take years for us to actually kind of even up and have equal opportunities for all. And I think it's mostly because it's very divided. It's very sectoral. There is more work that requires to be done in some industries, while some are actually catching up. So, Anuradha, in the last bit, I would like to know that, because you are attached with so many of these associations, NHRDN, FICCI, Chamber of Commerce. So what kind of work is happening in these organizations with respect to creating opportunities for women and kind of fostering women health and well-being and, giving women the mainstream?
So I think a number of things, and different bodies have a different focus. Some are more geared towards influencing policy change. Some are more geared towards, creating knowledge sharing and providing networking opportunities, or making women financially self-sufficient. Others are focused on pure leadership and training. But I think the one thing is clear that I've seen across the board, many of these bodies that I'm a part of, that a more inclusive workplace and focus on health and well-being has become center stage and is in one of the top 2 or 3 priorities, because we believe that it is fundamentally influencing engagement, culture, and performance of organizations. So I would say that I see a broad-based commitment. The second is, I think I see these bodies working towards education and training, opening minds, whether it's through seminars, panel discussions, sharing best practices. The third is I see them providing networking opportunities, and they could be, networking opportunities with other women role models. It could be shadowing senior leaders. So that is the nature. And the last is I see them starting to shape a point of view on whether it is gender balanced cities. How can you make cities more gender friendly? Or what's our point of view on balanced households? The last year has taught us how men and women have equally started to share the burden. How can we drive this? So they are working on, shaping points of view and policy in this regard. Also, you've seen that now women can work night shifts in some states, and that has also come as a result of influencing work that some of organizations like the CII, Employees Federation, etc., have actively been pursuing. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Anuradha. Very insightful.
Thank you.
So you've spoken a lot about role models. So do you have one who could be your role model?
So two actually. In my personal life, or my biggest role model is my mother, and I think she has been wonderful. First, in letting me believe that I can be whatever I want. I never had felt the pressure to. I come from a family which has a lot of high achievers, but I was never. I was the youngest of many cousins, but I was never sort of made to feel that I had to conform or I had to be something. And I think in that I was allowed to find my own space. But more importantly, I always say that 20 years of my career have been a joint production, thanks to my family and friends and support systems, and my parents, and particularly my mother, have really stood by me at various points. So my mother, for all of this and for her values, and she herself is a working woman who's balanced her career and our family priorities. The second is I've worked for very long with Leena Nair, who's been my boss, and she's the CHRO of Unilever. And I think working with her over the years, she was one of the first women, and she broke many bastions about being the first woman on the management committee, the first woman on the Unilever executive, and in fact made it easier for others who came after her. And I think she taught me, to believe in myself, that I could do more than I thought I was capable of, build self-confidence. And I think taught me the power of saying that it's okay to state your ambition, be open. You don't have to be apologetic. A lot of women are quite apologetic about their ambition. And working with Leena, I learned that it was okay to say that this is what I want to be. And if I get there, it's okay. But if not, at least I've said what I want to be. And I've always been surprised, because when you put it out there, the number of people who come and support are many. So these are my two big role models.
Thank you, Anuradha. I could go on, but I'm conscious that we have to end this discussion. Women's self-care, health and well-being is a very complex topic. And I am happy that, we are making a big stride in that. And really, thankful to you for taking out time and being here for this interview. I've had a lot to learn from you, and we've really got a bird eye view of HUL's current initiatives and all the great work that you've been doing.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.